I didn't plan to overhear anything that day. I just came early, the way I always do when I'm paying for something. The side door at Mark's place sticks in the cold, so I leaned my shoulder into it until it gave with a soft creak. Grocery bag in one hand, catering receipt in the other. I'd prepaid the meal, over $1,000, because I wanted Christmas to go smoothly this year. No fuss, no guilt. Then I heard his voice. "Just let Dad handle it," Mark said. His tone was casual, almost bored. "He likes keeping busy." Lydia laughed, that polite little laugh that sounds like kindness but means agreement. "He'll pay anyway," she said. "Like always." The words froze me in the hallway. I stood there, the grocery bag cutting into my fingers, cinnamon sticks peeking from the top, the kind she likes in her cider. The receipt crumpled in my fist. They had no idea I was there. "You know he'll do it," Mark added. "He always does." I backed out quietly and slipped through the same side door, easing it shut so it wouldn't creak. The cold air hit hard, sharp as honesty. I sat in my truck without starting it, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I waited for anger. What came instead was something smaller and heavier, the ache of finally understanding my place. For years, I'd been the dependable one, fixing leaky sinks, paying deposits, showing up first and leaving last. After Margaret died, I thought that was what a good father did, keep the family steady. I told myself it was love. Now parked at the curb with their laughter echoing through the window, it felt more like servitude, dressed up as devotion. The catering receipt lay across my lap. $1,043.27, a small fortune for people who didn't even know who paid. Through the living room window, I saw their decorations, gold ribbon on the mantel, matching stockings. The train set I built for Mark when he was 6, looping quietly under the tree. The same track, the same boy, only the roles had changed. I was still building things. He just stopped seeing it. My phone buzzed with a message. "Dad, can you grab extra ice and cider sticks on your way tomorrow?" "Thanks." No question mark, no please. Just an order disguised as gratitude. I stared at the text until the screen dimmed, then dropped the phone into the glove box. The sound of it hitting the plastic felt final. Margaret's voice came back to me, the way it does when I need it most. "Don't overdo it, Dave. If you make it too easy, they'll forget it was ever work." I used to laugh when she said that. I thought she didn't understand what being a father meant. Turns out she understood perfectly. The truck heater groaned to life, filling the cab with dry warmth. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, white hair, tired eyes, that old man jawline that always looks like it's holding something back. Maybe I was. Maybe every "sure, I'll handle it" had stolen a little piece of the man Margaret fell in love with. I started the engine, but I didn't drive off right away. The road ahead split two ways, one toward the bakery where I was supposed to pick up their desserts, the other toward home. For the first time, I turned the wrong way on purpose. When I pulled into my driveway, the house greeted me with the same familiar sigh, wood settling, heater clicking, that lonely hum a house makes when it's been waiting too long for footsteps. I hung up my coat, placed the receipt on the table, and stared at it under the yellow light. Catering order. Pick up deck 24, 3:30 p.m. Contact D. Marlowe. I traced the name with my thumb. It looked like a stranger's signature. On the wall hung a photo of Margaret, laughing, hand over her mouth. I could almost hear her teasing me. "You can't buy your way into love, Dave." Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been paying rent on relationships that no one else remembered to renew. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mark. "Also, can you take the kids upstairs after dinner?" Lydia's worried about the mess. No punctuation, no hesitation. Just expectation. I put the phone face down and let the silence settle. The heater kicked in again, rattling through the vents like a reminder that even machines need maintenance. I'd spent a lifetime maintaining things, houses, cars, people. Maybe it was time to fix the one thing I'd ignored, myself. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I'm not saying that for effect. I want you to understand this part, because this is where the story changes. That night, I wrote the date across the top of the receipt, December 22nd, and below it, one word: why did I keep showing up? Why did I confuse being needed with being wanted? The ink bled a little into the paper. I left it there, like a bruise I wasn't ready to heal. Then I walked over to the living room chair, where Margaret's old scarf still hung over the armrest. I pressed it to my face and whispered, "You were right." And maybe for the first time since she passed, I actually believed it. I went to bed without checking my messages, without setting an alarm. The world could wait. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd stop being useful, and maybe, finally, I'd start being me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Old habit. For years, I've believed the earlier you start the day, the more you can control it. But that morning, the house felt different. Like time itself was holding its breath. The catering receipt sat on the kitchen table where I left it. The ink had dried into the grain of the wood overnight, like it wanted to stay there, a quiet witness. I poured myself coffee, no sugar, no milk. The mug warmed my hands, but not much else. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that the anger would fade with daylight. It didn't. It just got quieter, heavier. I stared at that piece of paper until the numbers started to blur. Then I looked around my kitchen, the one I remodeled myself after Margaret passed. Every tile, every nail, every light fixture, all installed by my own hands. And yet, even here, in the one place that still carried her warmth, I felt like a guest. That feeling didn't come overnight. It's built slowly, one favor at a time. Mark's first house, I still remember it. The drywall smelled like dust and hope. He called me 3 nights before moving in. "Dad, the outlets aren't working in the kitchen. You know how to fix that stuff." I went after dinner, tools in hand. It was nearly midnight when I finished, sweat soaking through my flannel. He offered me leftover pizza and said, "You're the best, Dad." I drove home smiling, proud that he needed me. Then came the next favor, and the next, and the next. When Lydia had her 3rd baby, they asked if I could watch the older 2 just for the weekend. That weekend turned into 5 days. By the time they came back, my back hurt from bending over cribs, and my fridge was empty except for sippy cups. No one said thank you. They just said, "You're a lifesaver." Sophie, my younger one, is different. She lives 2 states away, calls when she can. Her voice always sounds like an apology. But distance makes her careful with requests. She knows what time costs. Mark, though. Mark stayed close. And somehow, that closeness turned into ownership. I walked to the living room and picked up a picture frame from the shelf. The last family Christmas before Margaret got sick. She was laughing, wearing that ridiculous reindeer sweater she loved. Mark had his arm around her, and I was standing behind them both. I looked happy in that photo. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just hadn't realized what I was losing yet. Grief does something strange. It tricks you into replacing people with purpose. After Margaret passed, I filled every hole with tasks. House repairs, errands, favors. When someone asked for help, it made me feel needed. That's how dependency starts, not as obligation, but as therapy. I turned the frame face down. I couldn't look at it anymore. Then, like muscle memory, I reached for the old drawer where I keep spare receipts and notepads. I pulled one out and drew 2 columns. At the top of the left, I wrote, "What I give." On the right, "What I get," I started listing. "Babysitting for Lydia, no thanks. Paid for Mark's new tires. I'll pay you back," and it never did. "Fixed Sophie's roof leak," she cried on the phone. That one stayed. Cooked every Christmas meal since 2015, no seat at the table, the left column filled fast, ink trailing down the margin. The right side stayed blank. I waited for something to come to mind. A gift, a word, a gesture, nothing. After a while I wrote one thing under "what I get," taken for granted. I sat back and looked at it. My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from recognition. That was my life summarized on one line. I glanced at the clock, 8:47 a.m., and imagined Mark's house waking up. Coffee brewing. Kids yelling. Lydia scrolling through recipes she wouldn't cook. Somewhere in that chaos, my name would come up. Not as Dad, not as we should invite him early, but as a solution. Ask Dad. I'd become a verb. I walked into the hallway and stopped at the closet where my old tool bag hangs. The zipper's broken, but I still keep it packed. Wrenches, tape, wire, the smell of steel and dust. The bag's been to every home my kids have owned. It's more familiar to them than I am. Margaret once told me, "Dave, you fix everything except yourself." I laughed then. Now it doesn't sound funny. The phone buzzed on the counter again, Mark's name lighting the screen. I didn't pick up. Instead, I took a slow sip of coffee and waited for it to stop ringing. It did. But it left a silence behind that felt almost alive. I pulled out my wallet and unfolded the catering receipt again. There in fine print at the bottom was the refund policy. Cancellations accepted 48 hours in advance. Tomorrow would be the 23rd. That meant I still had time. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like oxygen. I turned off my phone, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out onto the porch. The morning light was pale, but it hit the frost on the mailbox just right, like everything around me was waiting for permission to thaw. Before I walked down the steps, I glanced back at the front door. My hand hovered on the knob for a second. This house has been my anchor and my cage all at once. "I think I'm done carrying everyone else's Christmas," I said out loud. No one heard it. But that didn't matter, because for once, it wasn't about being heard. It was about finally listening to myself. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that presses on your chest like guilt. I got up around 2, padded barefoot to the kitchen, and turned on the light above the sink. It cast that weak yellow circle across the counter, the kind that makes everything look older than it is, including me. The note I'd written earlier, "What I give, what I get," was still there. The ink had faded slightly, bled into the paper. I sat down with a pen in hand, like a man preparing an audit of his own life. I added a new heading, given, then another, received. And under that, I started listing everything I could remember, not the big moments, but the small ones. The ones that add up like dust until you can't breathe. 2016, paid for Mark's new furnace. "We'll pay you back when taxes come in." They never did. 2017. Lydia's surgery, stayed with the kids for 10 days. Slept on the couch. Got the flu. No one asked how I was feeling. 2018. Fixed Sophie's bathroom tiles. She cried and hugged me. That one mattered. 2019. Bought the Christmas ham, desserts, and half the gifts. Heard Mark tell someone, "Dad insists on doing it." 2020. Babysat during their staycation, watched 9 kids between them and Lydia's sister. No sleep. No thanks. 2021. Lydia's car broke down, paid for the tow. 2022. Thanksgiving, cooked, cleaned, and still got the couch. The given column stretched down the page. The received side stayed nearly blank. After a while I wrote one thing there, loneliness with a purpose. Then crossed out with a purpose. The truth hit me like cold water. I'd been measuring love by output. I thought if I just gave enough, eventually I'd earn a seat at the table again. But giving without boundaries doesn't make people love you more. It makes them forget you're human. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. The kitchen clock ticked, steady, patient, indifferent. In the drawer beside me was a stack of old mail, bills, catalogues, a few handwritten notes from years ago. I sifted through them and found one envelope with my name written in Margaret's handwriting. The ink was faint, the paper yellowing at the edges. Inside was a small note she once left for me after a fight about work. "Don't let usefulness be the only language you know." I remember that night. I'd been fixing a broken lamp while she was trying to talk about her day. I told her, "Let me finish this first." She smiled sadly and said, "You're always finishing something before you start." Listening. I didn't realize until now she wasn't talking about the lamp. I set the note beside my list and just stared at the two together, her words and my evidence. One warning, one confession. The fridge hummed behind me, the only sound in the room. My mind wandered back to the day she passed, the quiet beeping of hospital machines, the way her hand felt lighter even before she let go. That day, I promised her I'd keep the family close, and I did, but somewhere in keeping them close, I stopped keeping myself. Around 3 a.m., I opened my notebook again and started a new page. 2 columns, fresh lines, what they assume, what I actually want on the left. They assume I don't mind babysitting. They assume I like paying for things. They assume I don't need rest. They assume I'm lucky just to be included. They assume Dad can handle it. On the right, for the first time, I wrote truths I'd never said aloud. I want to be invited, not assigned. I want to rest without guilt. I want to sit at the table, not serve it. I want to be seen, not used. I want to be their father again, not their safety net. When I finished, I read the list twice, then once more, slower. Each sentence felt like air coming back into my lungs. The refrigerator light flickered as the motor shut off. And in that new silence, I could hear my heartbeat, calm, certain. I closed the notebook and sat there for a long moment, thinking about the years behind me. I'd lived my whole adult life trying to be steady, the kind of man people could lean on. But even a beam cracks when the load never lifts. My phone buzzed once from the living room. A text, probably Mark again. I didn't need to check it. I already knew how it would sound. Another request, another assumption. Instead, I walked over to the counter where the catering receipt still sat. I turned it over. On the blank side, I wrote 3 words, no more carrying. Then I pinned it to the corkboard near the calendar, the one that's usually filled with grocery lists and doctor's appointments. That paper became my quiet rebellion, hanging there in plain sight like a secret only I could read. I went to the window. Outside, frost was gathering on the mailbox again, tiny white crystals spreading slow and steady. There was something beautiful about that. How frost forms quietly, but changes everything it touches. That's how I wanted to change. Quietly, but completely. I turned off the kitchen light and let the darkness return. Before heading back to bed, I stopped by the drawer where I'd seen Frank's old business card. I pulled it out again. Frank Ellison, Lakeside Carpentry. Below the number I'd scribbled years ago, call any time. I held the card between my fingers. I didn't call him, not yet. But this time I didn't put it back either. I slipped it into my wallet right behind my driver's license. A placeholder for possibility. As I climbed into bed, the house groaned once, like it was stretching after a long sleep. I took it as a sign. Tomorrow I decided I'd make one call. Not to Mark, not to Lydia, but to the one person who'd once told me, come out to the lake and let the younger ones do the work for a change. I smiled in the dark. Maybe I was finally ready to let them. Morning came grey and still, the kind of light that doesn't wake you so much as reveal that you never slept. I made coffee but didn't drink it right away. The first sip always tastes like routine, and I wasn't sure I wanted that anymore. The notebook from last night was still on the table. Pages open to the list, what they assume, what I actually want. I traced one sentence with my thumb. I want to be invited, not assigned. It looked simple on paper, but simple things have a way of feeling impossible when you've spent your life being agreeable. I sat there a long time until a thought, or maybe a memory, pulled me out of it. Frank Ellison. We apprenticed together 40 years ago, before he left to start his carpentry shop by the lake in New Mexico. Every November since Margaret died, he calls to say, "You've done enough work for 10 lifetimes. Dave, come let someone else cook for a change." And every year, I tell him the same thing. Can't, Frank, family first, family first. That phrase used to sound noble. Now it sounded like a leash. I picked up my phone. My hand hesitated over the screen, like even dialing freedom required permission. Then I hit call. "Frank," I said when he answered. He laughed, that deep, easy laugh that always made the air feel lighter. "I'll be damned. David Marlowe calling before Christmas. To what do I owe the miracle? I was wondering if that invitation still stands." He paused. "You mean you're actually coming this time? If you'll have me." "Have you? Hell, I'll dust off the guest room myself." "I don't need much," I said. "Just a chair and a little quiet. You'll get both." "Drive safe, old man." When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a few seconds, half expecting guilt to crawl back in through the cracks. It didn't. The silence that followed felt like fresh air after years of breathing in recycled noise. I opened my laptop and searched for the catering company's number. My cursor hovered over call customer service. My heart thumped. Not fear, not exactly. More like the tremor of a man realizing he can still choose, a young woman's voice answered. Good morning, Silver Spoon Catering. This is Claire. How can I help you? Morning, I said. I need to cancel an order for the 25th. Oh, I see. Could I have your name, sir? David Marlowe. Her tone changed slightly, polite, cautious. Ah, yes, the full dinner package. Is everything all right? Yes, I said. Everything's fine now. Well, the cancellation policy allows a partial refund, about half the amount. That's fine. Keep the rest. There was a pause. That's generous of you. No, I said, smiling. It's just overdue. When I hung up, I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The kitchen seemed lighter somehow, as if even the walls were exhaling with me. I reached for the catering receipt, still pinned to the corkboard, unpinned it, and tore it neatly in half. The sound was small but satisfying, like the click of a lock opening. I slipped the two halves into the trash, then pulled a clean sheet of paper from the notebook. Across the top I wrote, "What comes next?" Under it, only one line, "Go." I folded the paper, put it in my wallet, and started packing. I didn't need much. Jeans, a sweater, my old fishing cap, Margaret's scarf. I tossed in a paperback I'd never finished, The Old Man and the Sea. Funny, the older you get, the more certain stories start to sound autobiographical. As I zipped the small suitcase shut, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Tired eyes, yes, but not hollow. There was something new there. Not joy, not yet, but anticipation. The house felt different already. I unplugged the coffee pot, left the curtains open, and took one last look at the framed photo of Margaret on the mantel. You told me not to overdo it, I said softly. I finally listened. Outside, the air was crisp. The frost from the night before had melted into a thin shimmer across the driveway. My truck engine groaned once, then turned over, dependable as ever. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want words. I wanted space. As I drove through town, I passed the bakery where I'd ordered the desserts. Through the window, I saw the young clerk packing pastries into bright red boxes. She smiled at another customer, probably a father doing exactly what I'd done for years, buying sweetness for a family that mistook it for love. At the next light, my phone buzzed. Mark, I let it ring. A second call came before I hit the highway. Then a third. No voicemail, no text, just silence afterward, the kind that makes you imagine what they're saying in your absence. I didn't care, not this time. The road stretched ahead, wide and empty. The desert in winter has its own kind of mercy, flat, open, unjudging. I drove for hours, the sky bleeding from pale grey to gold, then fading back into deep blue. The sound of the tires on asphalt was steady, like a heartbeat I could finally hear again. For a long stretch, I thought about Mark as a boy, bringing me a cup of lukewarm tea on Father's Day. He'd poured it himself, water and honey, no tea bag. I told him it was perfect. Back then, love was small gestures that meant everything. Somewhere along the line, those gestures turned into expectations. Maybe that's how it always happens. People stop asking when they start assuming. By the time the sun began to sink behind the hills, I was halfway to Frank's. The world outside the windshield glowed with that soft orange that makes everything look forgiven. I thought of my house, quiet, warm, waiting. I thought of Mark's house, chaotic, entitled, unaware. And I thought of Margaret's last words before she went under for surgery all those years ago. Promise me you'll live, Dave, not just exist. For years I'd mistaken existing for living. But now, finally, I was keeping that promise. As the road curved around the lake, I whispered to myself, no more carrying, and for the first time in a long while, and I believed it, I left before sunrise. The world was still asleep. No traffic, no noise, just the quiet hum of the truck and the crunch of gravel under the tires. The city faded behind me like an old photograph, familiar, overexposed, and no longer mine. For the first few miles, guilt tried to hitch a ride. It sat in the passenger seat wearing my son's voice. You're overreacting, Dad. But the farther I drove, the softer that voice became, until it was just another sound swallowed by the road. I didn't play music. I wanted to hear everything. The low growl of the engine, the wind slicing past the mirrors, my own breathing steady and sure. It's strange how silence can sound like freedom once you stop being afraid of it. The horizon ahead stretched wide. Endless sky, thin streaks of gold splitting the clouds. Every few miles, I passed landmarks I'd forgotten existed. The rusted windmill outside Benson, the faded diner with the broken "Eat Here" sign. I must have driven this road 100 times before, but always heading towards someone else's need. This was the first time it was mine. Somewhere near the state line, I stopped for gas and coffee. The woman behind the counter smiled. Tired, kind eyes, silver hair tied back. "Traveling for the holidays?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. "Visiting family?" I smiled faintly. "No, ma'am. Just visiting peace." She chuckled, like she knew exactly what that meant. Outside, I leaned against the truck, sipping my coffee, watching the horizon burn with light. The air smelled like dust and pine, clean, unfiltered. I realized then that for years I'd lived inside other people's plans, other people's noise. This was the first time in decades I was living in my own. By late morning, I passed a stretch of road that curved along an old ranch. I slowed down without meaning to. Margaret and I once drove this way on our honeymoon, back when we were young and broke and didn't care that the motel bed creaked or that the air conditioner didn't work. She'd leaned her head out the window, laughing, shouting into the wind, "You feel that, Dave? That's life." Back then, I thought freedom was a thing you earned when you finished all your work. Now I know it's the thing you lose when you never stop working. The road dipped into the valley, the mountains rising in the distance like folded paper. My phone buzzed once from the glove box. I didn't open it. I'd turned it off earlier, but part of me must have bumped the button when I stopped for gas. I saw the name flash on the screen before it faded. Mark. For a moment, instinct tugged at me. Pick up. Fix it. Explain. But then I remembered what explaining always turned into: justification for their comfort. I reached over, powered the phone off again, and tossed it into the glove box. The click as it shut felt final, not angry, not spiteful, just done. A few hours later, I crossed into New Mexico. The welcome sign flashed by, weathered and sun-bleached. For some reason, I felt like it was meant for me personally. Around noon, I stopped at a diner on the outskirts of Las Cruces. One of those old places that looks like it hasn't changed since 1972. The waitress called everyone a sweetheart and moved slower than the clock on the wall. She refilled my mug 3 times without asking. A man about my age sat at the counter reading a newspaper. He looked up once and said, "Traveling alone?" "Yeah," I said. "Guess I am," he nodded. "Sometimes that's the best company." He was right. When I got back on the road, I turned on the heater and cracked the window. Cold air met warmth and filled the truck with something that felt alive. The afternoon sun slid lower, the light soft and golden. I thought about Mark again, about when he was 8 years old, walking beside me in the garage, trying to hand me a wrench that was always the wrong size. He'd say, "Tell me when, Dad," and I'd pretend to need a few more seconds just to keep him standing next to me a little longer. That memory hit me like a punch and a blessing all at once. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just grieving the version of him who used to look up to me. But grief, at least, means you cared. I rolled down the window and let the air whip through, cool and wild. Somewhere in the middle of that stretch of desert, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't the numb quiet of surrender. It was the stillness that comes when you stop arguing with the truth. I'd spent most of my life teaching my kids how to stand on their own 2 feet. I just never taught myself how to walk away. By sunset, the sky had turned to fire. The road narrowed into one long ribbon of orange light. I spotted a faded green sign that read, "Lakeside, 42 miles, almost there." I thought of calling Frank again, just to say I was close, but I didn't. I wanted the arrival to feel like surprise, for both of us. As I drove, I whispered a line to the windshield, half prayer, half promise. I'm not running away. I'm just going home to myself. Somewhere along that empty road, I realized I was smiling. Not because I'd escaped anything, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't headed toward disappointment, I was headed toward choice. Frank's cabin sat just past a ridge where the road turned to dirt, and the trees leaned in close like they were guarding something sacred. When I pulled up, the porch light flicked on automatically, casting a soft gold halo across the steps. The smell of pine hit first, clean, sharp, honest. Frank stepped out wearing the same flannel jacket he's had for 20 years, beard grayer but grin unchanged. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. The legend himself made it. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Guess I finally ran out of excuses." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Good. Leave them all at the door." Inside, the cabin was warm and simple. Stone fireplace, 2 old armchairs, the sound of a kettle beginning to hiss. No background noise, no voices asking for things. Just the quiet hum of life being lived instead of managed. He poured me coffee, the kind that tastes like campfire and friendship. "You staying through Christmas?" "That's the plan. Then you're cooking breakfast," he said, grinning. "Tradition around here is whoever arrives last does the bacon." I smiled. "I can handle that kind of work." We didn't talk much that first night. We didn't need to. We just sat by the fire while the snow started outside. That dry, soundless kind that turns the whole world soft. I slept better than I had in years. Christmas morning came quiet and slow. No alarms, no kids running down hallways. Just light creeping through pine branches and the smell of coffee filling the cabin. I stood at the window, watching the world wear white. For the first time in decades, there was no to-do list waiting for me. No errands, no groceries, no people depending on my exhaustion. Frank walked in, handing me a mug. "Happy Christmas, brother." "Happy Christmas," I said, and meant it. We cooked breakfast together, eggs, bacon, and a stack of pancakes so tall it leaned. He put on old country music from the radio, the kind with crackle and static. 2 neighbors stopped by with a tray of cinnamon rolls and a bottle of cider. Nobody expected anything from me. They just asked if I wanted seconds. That's how I knew I was healing, because I didn't feel guilty saying yes. Around noon, we all moved out to the porch. The air was cold but clean, sunlight bouncing off the snow so bright it almost hurt. Someone started a story about a turkey exploding one year, and before long, we were all laughing so hard I had to wipe tears from my eyes. At some point, Frank nudged me and said, "You look 10 years younger." "Feels like it," I said. "I guess I needed to disappear for a while." He nodded. "Nah, Dave, you didn't disappear. You just showed up for yourself." That sentence hit me deeper than I expected. Later that afternoon, when the porch quieted and most of the guests drifted home, I sat alone, watching the lake turn to silver in the fading light. I pulled out my wallet and unfolded the note I'd written before leaving home. "What comes next? Go," on the back. I added a line, "Stay gone until peace feels normal." The phone lay face down beside me on the porch table. It buzzed once, the same name lighting up the screen. Mark. I didn't answer. Frank looked over from the doorway. "You gonna get that?" "No," I said. "Not today." He nodded, walked back inside. He didn't ask why. That was the best part. He didn't need a reason to respect silence. The call stopped. A few seconds later, a text popped up. I caught a glimpse before the screen went dark again. "Dad, where are you? We need to talk." For a moment, the old instinct tried to rise, the urge to fix, to explain, to soothe. But then I remembered every holiday I'd spent cleaning dishes while they laughed. Every time I'd slept on the couch while others took the guest room. Every year I told myself it was fine because that's what love does. Love shouldn't feel like labor. I turned the phone off completely and laid it beside the mug. The air around me was still, almost holy. Somewhere far across the lake I could hear a single bell. Church, maybe, or just wind through the trees. That night after dinner, I walked outside alone. The snow had deepened, and the stars looked close enough to touch. My breath rose like smoke, and for the first time I didn't feel small under the sky. I felt part of it. I thought of Margaret then, her scarf, her laugh, her hand resting lightly on mine. And I swear I could almost hear her voice carried through the cold. "You did it, Dave." "Yeah," I whispered. "I finally did. I stayed on that porch until my fingers went numb, not because I was waiting for something, but because I didn't want the moment to end. Inside, the fire was still burning. I sat beside it and opened my notebook, the same one with the lists, the regrets, the what-ifs. I turned to a fresh page and wrote 3 new words across the top. Peace feels earned. I closed the cover and smiled. For years, I believed my worth lived in how much I could give. But here, surrounded by quiet laughter, coffee mugs, and honest air, I finally understood something Margaret had tried to teach me all along. You don't prove love by saying yes to everyone. You prove it by saying yes to yourself when no one else will. The flames cracked softly, the room glowing gold and orange. For the first time in my life, Christmas didn't feel like duty. It just felt like home. It was 3 days after Christmas when I heard the knock. Not gentle, not patient. The kind of knock that belongs to people who've already decided they're right. Frank was out running errands, so it was just me and the quiet when it started. 3 sharp hits against the wood, fast and full of purpose. I didn't need to check the window to know who it was. Some things you just feel. When I opened the door, the wind rushed in first, cold, sharp, and honest. Behind it stood my son, Mark. His jaw was tight, eyes red from the cold or maybe something else. Lydia stood half a step behind him, arms folded, her face set like stone. Beside her was Sophie, my daughter, looking smaller than I remembered, her hands fidgeting in her coat pockets. "Dad," Mark started. "What the hell?" I leaned against the frame, calm. "What the hell what?" "You disappeared. No calls, no messages. You cancelled the catering. Do you have any idea what that did to us?" "To you?" I repeated slowly. He exhaled hard, as if this conversation was an inconvenience. People showed up expecting dinner. The food never arrived. We had to run around town last minute. It was chaos. "You embarrassed us," Lydia jumped in. "We looked like fools, David. Everyone was asking where you were, what happened. You ruined Christmas." I let their words fall between us, heavy and useless. Sophie looked down, avoiding my eyes. "I ruined Christmas," I said finally. "That's the story you're going with?" Mark crossed his arms. "It's the truth," I nodded slowly. "No, son. The truth is, you planned a holiday around my wallet and my silence. You expected me to pay, to cook, to babysit, and then disappear upstairs while you enjoyed yourselves downstairs. You didn't invite me. You assigned me." He blinked, like the words didn't quite fit in his version of reality. "That's not fair. Neither is treating your father like staff." Lydia rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't make this dramatic." I smiled. "I'm small, tired." "That's the thing, Lydia. I'm done performing," she frowned. "Performing?" "All those years of pretending I didn't mind. Pretending it didn't sting to sleep on the couch while everyone else got a bed. Pretending it was love when it was just convenience. That was my performance. It's over now." Mark's voice rose, anger covering confusion. "So what? This is revenge? You punish everyone because you're feeling underappreciated." "No," I said. "This isn't punishment. This is correction." Sophie finally spoke, quiet but trembling. "Dad, we didn't know you felt that way." I turned to her. "Sweetheart, you didn't ask." That silence after landed harder than anything else. Even the wind outside paused, waiting. Lydia stepped forward, voice sharp. "You can't just vanish and expect everyone to understand." "I don't expect anything anymore," I said. "That's the whole point." Mark's jaw clenched. "You could have just talked to me." "I did." "Mark, every time I said it's fine, what I meant was, I'm tired. Every time I said don't worry about it, what I meant was, please see me. But you never did. You only noticed what I could do for you." His face cracked for the first time, confusion bleeding into shame. "Dad, that's not fair." "We love you," I smiled softly. "Then maybe you should start acting like it." For a long time, no one said a word. Lydia looked at her watch, like she was running out of patience. Sophie wiped her eyes. Mark stared past me into the cabin, maybe at the warmth he wasn't invited into. "Are you coming back?" he finally asked. "We can fix this." "No," I said. "I cancelled the order, remember? I just forgot to cancel myself." He shook his head, frustrated. "This is crazy. You're my father. And that's exactly why I had to stop." "Stop what?" letting you treat me like I'm not. I stepped aside and opened the door wider, not as an invitation but as a boundary. If you came here for an apology, you're not getting one. Mark stared at me, breathing hard, torn between pride and guilt. He looked so much like me in that moment it hurt. The same stubbornness, the same fear of being wrong. Lydia muttered, "Unbelievable," and turned back toward the car. Sophie hesitated, her eyes meeting mine for a heartbeat longer. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I know," I said. "You're learning." When the door closed behind them, I locked it quietly. No slam, no theatrics. Just the sound of a man sealing a chapter. I stood there for a while, hand resting on the cool wood, heart steady. The cabin was silent again, except for the faint pop of the fire. Frank came back a few minutes later with groceries. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Better than all right." He looked past me toward the driveway, where their car was still visible through the trees. "That looked intense." "It was overdue," I said. "But necessary," he nodded once, then handed me a paper bag. "Got your favorite coffee," I smiled. "You really do know how to time an entrance," he shrugged. "Old carpenter's rule. Measure twice, cut once, show up after the storm." I laughed, setting the groceries on the counter. "Good rule." We didn't talk about it after that. We didn't need to. Frank poured coffee while I stood by the window, watching the car disappear down the road. For a second, I wondered what they were saying in that car. Maybe anger, maybe confusion, maybe silence. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The problem had never been them not loving me. It was me never loving myself enough to make them earn it. When the snow started again, I felt something inside me finally unclench. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. Frank turned on the radio, an old Sinatra tune humming low. I sank into the armchair, the one closest to the fire, and let the warmth soak in. Some people think closure comes from other people's apologies. I learned it comes from your own permission. I gave myself that today. January moved like a soft breath across the lake, and then it was gone. Back home, the days settled into a new rhythm that didn't ask anything from me I wasn't willing to give. I kept the house simple. The Christmas box went back to the garage, the mantel cleared to just one photo of Margaret and a ceramic bowl for my keys. I changed the porch bulb, oiled the front door hinges, and for the first time in years, those small fixes felt like care instead of chores. I made a new list on a clean page. What stays? Morning coffee at the kitchen window, walks to the library on Saturdays, quiet dinners I actually taste. Saying no without a footnote under it. I added one more line, forgiveness but with locks. I meant it. I wasn't barricading the world. I was just closing the doors I used to leave standing open in a storm. On Thursdays, I started volunteering at the community woodshop. They put me in charge of sharp things and quiet kids. It was perfect. I taught them how to read grain, how to follow the line without fighting it, how to sand with the palm, not the fingers. We made birdhouses that leaned a little and pencil holders with too many holes. I sent them home with glue on their sleeves and pride on their faces. When a boy named Andre asked, "How do you know when it's finished?" I said, "When more work stops making it better." I wrote that down later. It looked like a rule I should have lived by sooner. On the first Sunday in February, I found a letter taped to my door. No stamp, just my name written in Mark's hurried hand. I stood there a long minute before opening it, the envelope thin as a confession. "Dad, I don't know how to write this. I'm sorry about Christmas. I'm sorry about a lot of things. I think I forgot you were a person because you never let me see you get tired. I'm working on that, on asking instead of assuming. If you can talk, call me. If you can't yet, I'll wait." Emma put the letter on the counter and walked to the sink. Turned the water on. Turned it off. Finally, I slid the page into the drawer where I keep the good napkins. Not to hide it, just to put it somewhere that means for when we sit down together. That week the house kept its polite quiet. No buzzing phone on the counter, no lists pinned to the corkboard. Peace arrived the way frost does, quietly, completely, and without asking permission. I still thought about Christmas. Not theirs, the one I missed, but the one I had. Frank called it a reset. I call it proof. Proof that love can survive outside obligation. Proof that the world doesn't end when you stop holding it up with both hands. One evening, I sorted the drawer where I used to keep receipts. I found the torn halves of the catering order and almost threw them away. Instead, I taped them together and wrote across the seam, tuition. Then I slid it into a plastic sleeve and filed it under lessons paid. It sounds dramatic. It isn't. Some tuitions you pay with money. Some you pay by leaving. By mid-February, I'd stopped checking my phone like it might bark orders. I answered the calls I wanted, returned the ones that sounded like care. Sophie called every Sunday evening, no agenda, just to share something ordinary. A good thrift find, a neighbor's cat, a recipe that didn't work. We laughed more than we used to. I told her about Andre's crooked birdhouse and she said, "That's exactly how a first try should look." She understood before I had to explain. Mark didn't call. Not right away. I didn't chase him. That was the biggest change. No more reaching into silence with explanations he didn't ask for. I set the table for one and didn't feel sorry about it. There is a dignity to a well-set table, even when it's just you. On a Wednesday in late February, I stopped by the library. The woman at the desk, Evelyn, saved me a new release because she's figured out I like quiet books where people repair small things, and that counts as plot. I sat in the southwest nook with the afternoon sun across my knees and read 3 chapters without looking at my phone once. When the light shifted, I closed the cover and just sat there. My body didn't feel like a hallway for other people's plans anymore. It felt like a home. That night I cooked stew and wrote another list, smaller. This time almost gentle, what I owe, the truth. Spoken once, my presence when invited with respect, my absence. When peace requires it, I taped it inside the pantry door. Not as a rule for anyone else, just a reminder for me. The call came on a Monday. Not late at night, not in a rush. Came 14 p.m., the soft hour between noise and dinner. The screen said Mark and I let it ring twice before answering. Not to punish him, but to give myself a breath. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice was smaller. Not the boy I raised. Not the man who told other people where to be. Someone in between. "Do you have a minute?" "I do," I said and meant it. "I've been thinking," he sighed. "I keep trying to find a way to say this that doesn't make me sound like a jerk. I probably am one. You're my son," I said. "That's complicated enough." He gave a short laugh that sounded like he hadn't practiced it. "I'm sorry. For the couch, for the lists I wrote with your name on them, for treating your help like air," he paused. "I didn't know where the line was because you never drew it. That's not an excuse. It's just true." "It is," I said. "Both parts." "I want to try again," he said. "I don't want to earn you back with chores or money. Just time. Maybe you could come over and not do anything. We'll sit. We'll make a mess and not ask you to fix it." I looked at the pantry door where the list was taped. My thumb found the edge of the paper like a habit. "I can do that," I said. "But we're going to talk about rules. Not punishments, just measurements. How we know when more work stops making it better." He was quiet for a long beat. "Okay," he said. "I can live with that." He cleared his throat. "I miss you, Dad." "I'm here," I said. "Just not where you're used to putting me." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen without moving. Not afraid, not relieved. Something steadier. A beam with the right load. I didn't rush to schedule anything. We would make the next move slowly. Old houses settle. So do families. March warmed the air and took the bite out of mornings. At the woodshop, Andre brought me a picture of the birdhouse we built, now painted crooked blue and lived in by a sparrow that yells. He asked if we could make a toolbox next. "We can," I told him. "But you'll carry it yourself," he grinned. "Deal." On the way home, I drove past the bakery without thinking of dessert boxes and strings tied to my name. Inside the window, a father helped his daughter choose cookies with too much frosting. He looked tired and happy and a little broke. I wished him all the love that comes with small mistakes and no receipts. Back at the house, I pulled Margaret's scarf from the chair and wrapped it once around my neck before hanging it in the closet. "You see this?" I said aloud like she needed the proof. "I'm living, not existing." The heater clicked on and the vents breathed steady. Somewhere outside, A neighbor's wind chimes lifted an ordinary note into the afternoon. I went to the corkboard by the calendar and pinned a new card where the catering receipt used to hang. Just a plain index card with a single sentence. Choose the life that returns your name to you. I stepped back and read it once, then turned off the kitchen light and let the late sun do the work. It took losing their Christmas to finally have my own. But the better truth is simpler. I didn't lose anything. I put it down. And when I was ready, I picked up only what belonged to me. The rest can ring the doorbell. I'll open if peace answers first.